The sun was hot in Ouagadougou, the capital city of Burkina Faso. The heat made everything feel slow. Cars moved gently through the dusty roads. Street vendors wiped sweat from their faces as they sold fruits, water, and food to people passing by. Birds flew low, looking for shade. But something stronger than the heat was building up inside the presidential palace. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader of Burkina Faso, sat quietly at his desk. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. His hands rested on a file full of papers. These were not normal papers. These papers told a story, one that made Traoré's heart burn with anger. He had just received a report. It came from his most trusted security team. The report said that foreign agents were moving inside Burkina Faso. French forces were still active in places they had been told to leave. Drones were flying over army bases. Spies were sending messages to rebel fighters. And most of this was being linked to one place, France. For many years, France had controlled parts of Africa, including Burkina Faso. Even after independence, France continued to pull the strings behind the scenes. They gave loans, but with big demands. They took gold, oil, and other resources, but gave little back. They trained African soldiers, but also used them for their own interests. Captain Traoré knew this story very well. He had read it in books. He had seen it with his own eyes. He had watched how French leaders spoke to African leaders, as if they were children, not equals. He had seen how President Emmanuel Macron made phone calls to African presidents, giving orders like a boss. But Traoré was not like the old leaders. He stood up from his desk and walked to the window. He looked outside at the wide blue sky. His voice was low but full of fire. "Enough," he whispered. He had tried to be patient. He had asked the French army to leave. He had given time. He had spoken with respect. But now, the truth was clear. France was still trying to control his country. And they were doing it in secret ways. Traoré turned around and looked at the map of Africa on his wall. He touched Burkina Faso with his finger, then slowly moved it toward Mali and Niger. He knew he was not alone. Other African countries were feeling the same pain. Other young leaders were rising, just like him. They were tired of being told what to do. Tired of being poor while their land was rich. Tired of watching their people suffer while foreign powers smiled. That day, something changed in Traoré. He no longer wanted to ask. He no longer wanted to wait. He wanted to speak, and he wanted the world to hear it. A storm was coming. A silent storm. And it was about to shake the earth. 2 days later, something big happened in Burkina Faso. The country's president, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, called for a press conference. Journalists from across Africa came. The room was full. Cameras were ready. Microphones pointed toward the stage. No one knew what he was going to say. Some people thought it was about security. Others thought it was about the economy. But deep inside, Traoré had one message. And that message was not just for his country, it was for the whole world. Traoré walked in wearing his army uniform. His face was serious. His steps were slow, but firm. He stood tall in front of the microphone and looked at everyone in the room. Then he began to speak. "I will not hide the truth anymore," he said. "This message is for President Emmanuel Macron, and for all who still see Africa as their property." The room went quiet. "Africa is not your land," he said clearly. "Burkina Faso is not your toy. You no longer have control over us. If you continue your secret missions in our country and our region, we will treat you as enemies, not as friends." People in the room looked shocked. Some even held their breath. No African leader had spoken like this in years. It was bold. It was direct. It was something the world didn't expect. Traoré did not stop. He raised his voice a little and said, "We have suffered enough. We want peace, but we are not afraid of war. We want friendship, but we will never accept slavery again." That short speech became news across the world. The message was clear. Traoré had drawn a line in the sand. And he had just sent a warning that no one would forget. The next morning, the world woke up to something surprising. News channels all over Africa, Europe, and even America was showing the same thing, Traoré's message to Emmanuel Macron. It was on TV, on radios, and on every phone screen. The headlines were loud and clear. Traoré tells France to stay out. Burkina Faso leader sends strong message to Macron. In France, many politicians were angry. They said Traoré was being rude and ungrateful. Some called for action against Burkina Faso. But the French people were divided. Some of them said, this young African leader is just telling the truth. France has done too much in Africa for too long. In Africa, it was a different story. From Mali to Niger, people were cheering. Videos on social media showed young men dancing in the streets. Women were singing songs. Flags of Burkina Faso were flying everywhere. Some people held signs that said, Traoré speaks for Africa. No more neocolonialism. We stand with truth. Other African leaders began to speak out too. They thanked Traoré for his courage. One leader from Mali said, he is not just speaking for Burkina Faso. He is speaking for all of us. In schools, students talked about Traoré's speech. In mosques and churches, people prayed for him. In poor villages and busy cities, people felt a new kind of hope. One thing was clear, Traoré's message had touched the heart of Africa, and the world was watching closely. Many people were shocked by Captain Traoré's warning to President Macron. Some thought he was just speaking with anger. Others thought it was only politics. But the truth was deeper. Traoré had been watching France's actions for a long time. And he had real proof. For months, Traoré's security team had been quietly following strange movements near army bases and in small towns. They saw unknown people taking photos of military trucks. They caught radio signals coming from outside the country. And they found something even worse, French agents speaking secretly with rebels. One night, his team arrested 2 men with fake IDs. When their phones were checked, there were messages in French, maps, and voice notes talking about army positions in Burkina Faso. It was clear, they were spies. Traoré did not speak right away. He stayed silent, even when people asked questions. He wanted to be sure. So he waited. He collected more evidence, videos, recordings, secret documents. He kept everything in a locked file marked France Operations. By the time he gave his speech, he already knew what was happening. France was not just watching. They were interfering. They were helping people who wanted to weaken his country. This made Traoré angry. Not just because it was a betrayal, but because his people were dying. Soldiers were being attacked. Villages were being burned. And behind the curtain, someone was pulling the strings. So, when he gave the warning, it was not just words. It was a message backed by truth. A message filled with fire. A message to say, I know what you are doing. And it ends now. President Emmanuel Macron sat in his office in Paris, reading the reports. His face was tight. His fingers tapped the desk. His advisors stood around him, silent. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's speech had gone viral. Every news channel was playing it. People in Africa were cheering. Even some French citizens were saying, maybe it's time to leave Africa alone. Macron didn't say anything at first. He was used to African leaders who stayed quiet, followed orders, or asked for help. But Traoré was different. He didn't ask. He didn't beg. He gave a warning, and he meant it. One advisor broke the silence. Mr. President, this is dangerous. If Burkina Faso kicks us out, others will follow. We may lose all of West Africa. Another added, if we lose Africa, we lose money, influence, and power. We need to act fast. But Macron shook his head slowly. Deep inside, he was worried. He knew Traoré was not just talking. He had support from his people. He had the army behind him. He had the truth in his hands. Macron thought of the French soldiers still in Burkina Faso. If they stayed, there could be violence. If they left, France would look weak. So he stayed quiet. He didn't reply to Traoré in public. He didn't hold a press conference. He didn't make a strong speech like before. Why? Because this time, he was facing a leader who was not afraid. A leader who could not be bought. A leader who had already lit a fire in Africa. And deep in his heart, Macron felt something new, fear. After Captain Ibrahim Traoré's strong message, something powerful began to happen across Africa. It started like a quiet wind, then it turned into a loud voice. That voice came from the hearts of millions of Africans who were tired of being used, ignored, and disrespected. In Mali, people held signs that said, "France must go." In Niger, young men climbed rooftops waving Burkina Faso's flag. In Guinea, women danced in the streets and sang songs with Traoré's name. African leaders started paying attention. Some were afraid. Others were excited. Many of them had kept silent for years because of pressure from foreign powers. But now, they saw that someone had stood up, and the sky didn't fall. In fact, the people rose with him. The presidents of Mali and Niger quickly spoke out. They praised Traoré's courage. One said, "Traoré spoke for all of us. Africa is not for sale." Soon, French soldiers in Mali and Niger were also told to leave. Military bases were shut down. French ambassadors were sent back home. One by one, the doors of Africa were closing on neocolonialism. Across the continent, African youth began to dream again. They no longer wanted to run to Europe. They wanted to stay and build their own nations. They saw Traoré as a symbol, a sign that things could change. Schools began teaching students about real African history, not just European versions. People started saying, "We are rich in gold, oil, land, and people. Why are we still poor?" It was clear, a new Africa was waking up. And it all started with one brave voice from Burkina Faso. The world could no longer ignore what was happening in Africa. Traoré's warning to France had opened a door that could not be closed again. People everywhere were watching, governments, news agencies, universities, and even young children. The United Nations held a meeting. Some leaders asked Traoré to stay calm. They said, "We want peace. Please talk, not fight." The European Union sent letters to Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, asking for dialogue and understanding. But the African people had already made their choice. They did not want more talks. They wanted freedom. Traoré answered the world in a new interview. He sat in front of the camera in his simple uniform. He looked calm, but his voice was firm. "We are not against peace," he said. "We are not against Europe. But we are against control. We are against disrespect. We are against those who think Africa belongs to them." He looked straight into the camera and said something that made history. "We want friends, not masters. We want trade, not chains. We want respect, not control. If the world cannot understand this, then the world will see an Africa it has never seen before." Those words were shared all over the world. Students in Brazil and India wrote essays about them. Artists in Nigeria painted murals of Traoré with those words written behind him. Protesters in Haiti and the Congo held signs that repeated them. People started to believe that Africa was rising, not with war, but with truth and courage. And at the center of it all was a young man who dared to say what others feared to speak. A man who had no gold crown, no palace, and no big army, but had the heart of a lion and the voice of a people. That man was Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Moments passed, but the world never forgot the warning Captain Ibrahim Traoré gave to Emmanuel Macron. That moment became more than just a speech. It became a symbol, a story told again and again across Africa and beyond. In schools, teachers told children about the day a young leader stood up for his country. They taught students that courage was not about weapons or money, but about speaking the truth, even when it was hard. In villages, people shared the story around fires. Elders said Traoré's words were like thunder that woke Africa from a long sleep. They said it was a call to all Africans to protect their land and their freedom. Leaders in other countries began to act differently. They stopped listening only to foreign powers. They started listening to their people's voices. They began to work together, building strong friendships across Africa. Traoré became more than a president. He became a symbol of hope. People called him the voice of Africa. They saw him as a man who gave them courage to dream of a better future. The world changed slowly but surely. France and other old powers had to rethink their role. Some soldiers left Africa for good. Some businesses changed how they worked. And new partnerships were made, partnerships based on respect and equality. But the most important change was inside the hearts of millions of Africans. They believed in themselves again. They believed Africa could be free, strong, and proud. One day, a young boy in a small village whispered to his mother, "I want to be like Traoré. I want to stand up and speak for my people." And just like that, the warning Captain Traoré gave had become a spark, one that would keep burning for generations. Because courage, truth, and respect can never be forgotten.